Welcome to Kibbe on Liberty. Sara, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Thanks for having me.
I think we met almost a year ago, well, less than a year ago, because it was at Freedom Fest in Vegas, right?
Yeah. And me and Terry were on the panel together.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I was being kind of an a-hole my wife and I have this ongoing debate about feminism.
Yep.
And in some ways it's just a play on the words because she insists that she's not a feminist because she finds the whole concept to be patronizing to women.
Yeah.
And I insist that I'm a radical feminist and my hero is Ayn Rand and I mean exactly what she means.
Yeah.
But it's the nomenclature and maybe we'll get into that today because I think so much of what we argue about is words and imputed meaning instead of what people are actually trying to say.
Yeah, exactly. And
actually
there's so many
trying to hear.
waves of feminism and everything like that. And it's just like, what does it actually mean?
And poor Ovens O'Brien was the only self-described feminist on the panel.
Yeah. that was, and she was the moderator. So it's like you're trying to moderate to a bunch of people that aren't feminist and define feminism in certain different ways, you know?
Yeah. And you are in Washington, D.C. for an anti-war protest.
Yeah, so the Libertarian Party is doing the Rage Against the War Machine this weekend, and so I'm here, and I'm speaking. It's gonna be a great event because, you have people like Ron Paul's gonna be there. He's actually coming to DC to do this event, which I don't think he's doing a lot of in-person events anymore.
No.
And then you have Tulsi Gabbard who's speaking right after him, and so you have this wide collection of people. I mean, when you get the Libertarian Party and then the People's Party, which is the Communist Party, and it's they're working together to stop war. I think that's what people can learn a lot about working together on single issue advocacy.
Yeah, I mean, I feel strongly that way. And do you call yourself a libertarian?
Yeah, well, yeah, I say I'm a libertarian in terms of practical matter, but I am a minarchist, so I do believe that the government has one single role, and that's to provide a national defense force to protect our borders, but not go overseas and fight other people's wars.
Yeah, yeah. But even that, all these words, what do you mean by that? But
yeah.
But so much of, and particularly over the last 3 years, I've decided that there is an emerging anti-authoritarian coalition.
Yeah.
That comes from all over the place.
Yeah.
So I think if you're not willing to talk to someone because you adamantly disagree with them. I mean, Tulsi just a couple years ago was a Bernie bro.
Yep.
And I could be apoplectic about that. How could she support Bernie Sanders because we disagree on so much?
Yep.
Or you could say, wow, she's saying a lot of really interesting things that I agree with, and we should explore that.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of libertarians get hung up on her stance on gun control and stuff like that, but it's when she's saying stuff that you agree with, why don't you talk to her and do these things? And I actually learned that type of concept from Spike Cohen. If you remember, Spike Cohen a few years ago was working with BLM on criminal justice reform. People that have nothing in common, they were able to agree to disagree on stuff and then, fight for the stuff that they do agree on. And so that's what I've always looked at that and been we should be working more towards that. Even in my activism, on the trans issues and stuff like that, it's I can work with anybody on these issues, but I can disagree with you on those other issues.
Yeah.
But like you said, I think it's really interesting because the neocons are on their way out. I think that the warmongers in Congress they're on their way out. Dan Crenshaw gets hate all the time, as he should, because he is one of these people that thinks we have to have this, big global foreign power, and we have to have a presence everywhere in the world in order to keep us safe. And I just think that's a big lie. It's all for money. It's all for the military-industrial complex.
You're optimistic about that, and I'm going to latch onto your optimism because it also seems, more in the Republican Party, starting with the Ron Paul movement and the Tea Party, and now even a lot of elements of America First.
Yeah.
And I definitely don't agree with all of that, but a lot of those elements are pushing the Republican Party to be more skeptical of never-ending war.
Yeah.
But the Democrats, on the other hand, have mostly abandoned that. There's exceptions, but even the exceptions are not particularly consistent anymore. Years ago, 3 years ago, I saw Bernie Sanders at an AUMF hearing that Rand Paul had organized.
Mm-hmm.
And Bernie was awesome. Like, I was ready to become a Bernie bro. I should admit this on camera. But they're inconsistent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that is interesting. I think that's what we've always seen from both parties, is that it's like they're anti-war when the other party's in power. Like when George Bush was in power, they all voted for the Iraq War, but then they were all against it when they were running for office. And it was the same type of thing. It was always, we're going to get out of the wars. We're going to get out of the wars. And then when they get into office, they're starting new wars. And that's one of the things that Trump did. I think a lot of people like that Trump did. He didn't start any new wars. He was the first president in how long that didn't start any new wars. And I think that drew a lot of people to that. And that's what kind of started to make these changes, to be like, okay, we're going to be anti-war party now, and actually stick by it.
Yeah, this was the strategically, philosophically was the Achilles heel of the Tea Party's attempt to balance the budget. Mm-hmm. There's kind of a quaint idea that we would balance the budget anymore, but you had elected so many people that absolutely were for limited government, and with the exception of fully funding the war on terror.
Yep.
And that is a black hole as big as any financial black hole could be. So they ended up not being able to actually do what they thought they wanted to do.
Yeah. And that's kind of my that goes into my story, is like, I was a Tea Party conservative. Like, I was just graduating college. Like I graduated college in 2009. So it was around that time that the Tea Party was really getting going. I loved Ron Paul's message, but I couldn't get behind his foreign policy. And that was the biggest thing. And so and then I was a big patriot. So I graduated college again in 2009, no jobs available. And so I went to be a logistics officer in the Army. About 5 years in, they were teaching me in my captain's career course to see war from big picture, policy, and see like strategically how you invade countries and stuff. And that's when I looked at a map and realized that the reason why we went into Iraq in the first place was not for, it wasn't for oil, it wasn't for weapons of mass destruction. It was so we could have a double flank, a strategic position on Iran. And I was like, well, and then you start to see like ISIS grow because of our destabilization there. And that was my Ron Paul was right moment. We're just, destabilizing this region. So that's the reason why we're creating all these radicals against us. And that's when 2 years later, I got out of the Army. And that's when I'm now speaking at anti-war rallies, because again, we should just be protecting our own borders with our military. We shouldn't be, and then taking the money that they steal from us every day to go fund, proxy wars around the world either.
Yeah, that was, I was happy to see it. It was kind of a revelation to discover that so much of Ron Paul's support actually came from veterans. Even though, at a face value, you might say that doesn't make sense to me. You should go with a candidate that's saber rattling. And America F yeah. But once you're there, you discover that a lot of those promises were empty.
Yeah. Well, and that's and you also going back to like what you were talking about, the Tea Party movement and their wanting to end the debt and everything like that. I was so disenfranchised from the Republican Party as well from that, because it was like we got all these people elected that was their main mission, was to lower the debt, and then you see them passing massive spending bills and doing nothing about it. You're like, what is going on? And so that's when it just disenfranchises you from the entire government. You're like, they're no different than the other side. They're just wanting to spend on their pet projects.
Yeah, and I should say, like the most of the Republicans that betrayed the Tea Party goal to actually rein in the size of government were the leftovers from like Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, that's the name that was coming to my head.
He's still
too.
here, yeah. And he was enemy number one, but also I guess Paul Ryan was speaker at the time that the fiscal responsibility stuff unraveled, and they want to fund all the wars. So what do you do as the minority within your own party? It's difficult. At Kibbe on Liberty, freedom is a lifestyle 24/7, something you live and breathe and wear every day. If that describes you, you need the very best Liberty swag in the market today, just like this shirt I happen to be wearing. Go to freethepeople.org/KOL and check out our exciting merch. you too can love liberty and look cool.
Yeah, and that's what happens a lot too, is a lot of people don't see like what goes on behind the scenes, because there's a lot of people that support different bills and all this stuff. But one, if you can't get 60 votes in the Senate, they won't even bring it to the floor, which I think that's flawed. I think you bring it to the floor and show who who is against these types of bills. I think you should, bring every bill to the floor for a vote. Same thing as and then so they won't bring those bills to the floor, and then if they don't like the bills, they just cancel them. So really, you have like whoever's leading the House and Senate, you have them basically controlling what bills go forward, and so it's like all the stuff that they want to go forward, but it's not really what the people want to go forward. So the system's a little bit antiquated in that way.
Yeah, it's fascinating that, and then I want to get to your story, but the fight over the speakership in the House has, against all odds, actually created some really positive dynamics. You have Thomas Massey on the Rules Committee, which in his configuration might be the equivalent of being in Mordor, but he is able to bring various bills to the floor in the House, and the House is very much designed so that individual members have no say. And the Senate is supposed to be the place where any member can speak up, but the two party, it's McConnell and who is it?
Who's actually? Yeah, who's the? It's not Schumer.
It's Schumer.
Is it Schumer?
Yeah, it's Schumer. But they're kind of the same guy. That's why you can't tell them apart. So we'll see what happens there. But I want to get to your story. I don't know that much about your story. I heard what you talk about at Freedom Fest, and I listened to you on Tim Pool the other night. You're not the same person you used to be.
No, not at all. If you could tell. No, so I think around the age of 4, I had realized something was different about who I was. Growing up, I kept this secret that I had gender dysphoria. Didn't know what it was at the time, growing up in the 90s and stuff like that. It wasn't something that was really prevalent. And then, again, I would join the Army, in about 2014. I came out to the first person I ever came out to, which was my ex-wife at the time, and first person I ever trusted to come out. And then we separated at the end of 2015. I started to explore more and then go into that. And in 2017, I ended up getting out of the Army and then moving to Atlanta. And that's really where I was able to live part-time as a woman. And so I then, trying to figure out if this was what was right for me, ended up talking to a therapist and everything like that. Then came out to the rest of my family in July of 2018. Very accepting family, very open. Still didn't know what it was at that time, but then I ended up starting taking hormones in March of 2019. Knew that this was exactly what I wanted to do, that it was going to be what's right for me. And really, it's just the way that I've been able to, live such a comfortable life. But then now, in about 2018 as well, I started seeing the trend that we're seeing now, where it was starting to be pushed, like queer theory is being pushed onto children. And I was kicked out of 2 Reddit groups for saying that transgenders exist, and when the detransition rate skyrockets, it's going to hurt actual trans people. And we're seeing that starting to happen now. Like those people, the detransitioners who were fooled into transitioning and taking, medicalizing, they're speaking up. And so and they're taking a lot of hate for doing that. And so now lately, it's like that's been the biggest push that I've been working on, is going out, speaking with like all these mom organizations around the country to like just spread awareness, and then also starting to push bills and working with some organizations to get some of these good bills that you're seeing pop up across the country and stuff like that as well.
So talk, what's a good bill?
Banning puberty blockers for children because they're not safe. But I think one of the biggest bills that I've actually worked with some people on is not even really a bill to ban anything or do any of that. It's really to fund studies, because right now there's not a lot of studies. They're just going off of feelings. And it's like, so, the FDA doesn't even, puberty blockers are issued on off-label for children like in puberty age. All the studies are shown for precocious puberty, which is like from 5, 6, 7 years old going into puberty, and you wouldn't want a child to go into puberty that young. And so they get them to like one of these key developmental ages and then take them off, and they will go through puberty like normal. But now they're finding that for the off-label use, if you push somebody through put somebody on off label, then you end up there's all these different complications. Like there's brain developmental issues, there's bone density issues that they're finding. There's even like Marcy Bowers, who is the president of WPATH, which is the World Professionals Association of Transgender Health. They give all the guidance for how to treat trans people. The president of that organization said that if you actually block a child with she's a surgeon, so if you actually block the child before they go into puberty, and then they go on cross-sex hormones, and then they have, bottom surgery, they will never be able to orgasm as an adult. So my thing is like, how can you even consent to something that you don't even know what it means? And so you're taking away this stuff from children when they don't even know what it means. And honestly, we have age of consent laws for a reason. Children don't have the cognitive ability to, understand the full ramifications of their their decisions.
So this perspective, I'm thinking about the Venn diagram of veteran trans libertarian who's anti-woke. I don't even know what to call it, but sort of anti-woke trans ideology.
Yep.
Like the political, it seems all politicized now, and and you can't deal with people as individuals, and you have to join Team A or Team B, and you guys have acronyms for all of this stuff. There's what is it? What is a TERF now?
Oh, so the Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist.
Yeah.
And I've actually heard, it's funny, I've heard somebody else call it, like, yeah, I'm a TERF. I'm a trans, what is it? A trans embracing radical feminist,
Yeah.
So to like turn it around on them, you have the acronym, what it actually means, but then you can kind of turn it around. But yeah, the TERFs, and some people are reclaiming it, the actual like the third wave feminists that have been fighting this for a long time, they're reclaiming the word. They're calling themselves TERFs now because they're like, yes, I'm proud to be a TERF. And it's really interesting because they don't like people like me. They think by me simply existing and I am pushing the ideology simply by existing as a trans person out here. And it's kind of it's really an interesting dynamic because then they also don't like, some of the other, conservative commentators, like the men out here, because again, they're third wave feminists, so they're not really wanting men to now take the credit for what they've been doing for a long time.
Yeah. It's and you've weighed in on the whole J.K. Rowling thing.
Oh yeah, I bought the video game. I bought the video game simply to support J.K. Rowling because that's the thing is, I mean, she is a feminist, but she's not actually even that radical when you look at like all the stuff that she's saying. She literally wrote her whole thing, and it was like everything is like, I have trans friends, I love trans people. I'm just concerned about these aspects of what we're seeing, especially when it's coming to children. But they will, condemn her. They'll tell you can't even buy a video game because it has her name on it, Yeah. And it's like, and they'll say that that's harming trans people by playing a video game, and it's just a ridiculous notion, but it's all for control, and that's how the woke, the left, the super left operate. They want to control you. They want to control your speech. They want to control everything. What's really ironic about the J.K. Rowling stuff is, a lot of these leftists push like these anti-free speech laws, like these hate speech laws and stuff like that. Well, somebody commented something on J.K. Rowling's, and she decided to use their anti-libel laws to silence that person. It was kind of hilarious, and I'm like, I don't agree with silencing people. I agree with free speech, but it's funny. You don't like it when it's used against you, but you guys asked for it.
Yeah, I saw that, and the person she did that to, at least one of them was, I mean, as the woke left does, throwing around the word Nazi or fascist.
Yeah. They called her a Nazi, and that was like, that's libel.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah. The thing that frustrates me is that it's become so politicized, and you already said this, but I think it's very important to point out that I think it actually sets people like you back, because it's now forcing everybody to take a side. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of like the anti-fascists, like when they want you to pick a side, what they're really saying is if you're not a Marxist, you're a Nazi.
Yep.
And there's no like not middle ground, but there's no individual empathy for what a specific person is dealing with. And it becomes a war. Yeah.
Well, and these are the same Marxists that are pushing this stuff. You see a lot of the Antifa members are like the green-haired, like, non-binary people, but it's all based in the queer theory. And queer theory is, just like all critical theories, is based in postmodern neo-Marxism. And so I always contend that like the Q aspect is it will eventually try to erase the LGB in the original T, which was for transsexuals who would actually transition, because they don't believe in sexuality, because they don't believe in absolute truth. So it's like when you believe in those things, they will literally erase it. So the communities are very separate in that regard. And I think that for the most part, most trans people that are out there would transition, and then they would go stealth and just live their lives as normal. They didn't want to be put in the spotlight, which is one of my frustrations. I mean, I get it. But it's like all these people who have just been living their lives, stealth for so long, they're not willing to step out because they're living a nice, comfortable life. So what you're seeing is like, the 8% rule, where it's like the most radical 8% is setting the perception of the entire group. So, which is why I think it's so important for, right-leaning or even just centrists, just people that don't agree with the super woke stuff, just to be out here and speaking about it. The Gays Against Groomers organization, they are apolitical for a reason. Now that most people on there are very right-leaning because we're the ones that are willing to fight back against the extreme left. But we have a lot of people, like even Buck Angel he'll tell you he's still a liberal. Like he's not a conservative. He doesn't vote conservative, but he's a liberal, but he's still fighting against this woke agenda. There's a lot of people
you mentioned him on Tim Pool. I don't know who that is.
So Buck Angel is like the first trans man that ever transitioned. The most notable. He was kind of the experiment in California, where they didn't know what testosterone would do to the female body, and so he almost died one time from atrophy. And so like they figured it out with him, and now what you're seeing is with the youth right now is the results. But don't go Google him, because he's also a porn star, and so you might get some images that you don't want to see. But yes, and so now he's out here trying to protect children.
Thanks for that advice.
Yeah, which is what's interesting, because again, it's like now they say, oh, you did porn, you're trans. How can you even try to protect children when you're living this life that doesn't, that children shouldn't be even involved in? It's like, yes, shouldn't you be the best person to fight against this ideology? I mean, I've lived it. I know exactly what they're going through and what's happening. So I would be one of the best people out here to fight against, transitioning of children.
Thank you for joining me today on Kibbe on Liberty, and for being part of our fiercely independent audience. Every week, my organization, Free the People, partners with Blaze TV to bring you this show. My guests bring smart perspectives on everything from current events to timeless philosophical debates. If you like what you hear, go to freethepeople.org/KOL and support Kibbe on Liberty so we can continue to produce these honest conversations with interesting people. Now, let's get back to it. So I have Terry and I have a friend, and this is going to be part of our book, and we just did a long conversation with Deirdre McCloskey. Do you know who Deirdre is?
For the name.
She is she's one of the best classical liberal free market economists alive today, and Deirdre was once Donald, and Donald was a professor of mine at George Mason University. I shouldn't say how many years ago, because it was a long time ago. And I knew Donald, and Terry got to know Deirdre doing this road show through Europe called the Free Market Roadshow, and it's a great place to really get to know somebody, because you're driving all night and you're drinking too much, and you end up in a country you've never been in before, and you have to be on your game and give a speech.
Yeah.
But they were, at the time they were talking about Deirdre's book Crossing. She went through this in the early 1990s when it was insanely difficult to do. Her sister had her committed twice. She lost her family. It's kind of a horror story.
Yeah.
But she so wanted to do that, and what I don't know if I think she buys it, because we were having this conversation in preparation for this book. The blowback from this radical form of trans ideology really kind of tramples everything that she tried to pioneer.
Yeah.
Which was, let me be me.
Yeah, the live and let live mentality is gone.
Yeah. So she's kind of OG as well.
Yeah, that's great.
But I'll tell you, like the first time I met Deirdre, and again, this would have been, I guess, early 2000s. It was uncomfortable for me because I didn't know what the rules were, and it was just different then. Like,
yeah.
And I'm pretty live and let live, but I can see where people struggle, and you sort of got to give them a little bit of time and room to figure out.
Absolutely.
You, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like this is why especially when I came out to people that have only ever known me like this, it's easy. But like all the people, like my family and everything like that, there is a learning curve. And my family lives, 11 hours away from me. And so there's a learning curve, and they don't see me all the time. So it's still a learning curve, even coming up on 5 years after I've transitioned, which is absolutely fine. You give people grace, and as long as, they're still treating you with respect and they still love you and they still want you in their life, then I think that it should be fine. The problem is now with like the radicals is they want to compel your speech. They want to control you. And the whole like pronoun debate, like how many times do you actually use pronouns when the person's actually in the room? Like they're trying to compel speech when you're not even there. I always say, like, if you want to respect me but you don't want to use she, her pronouns for me, just use my name. That's absolutely fine. That's my legal name, everything like that.
That's not that hard, is it?
No.
Yeah.
And when what you say when I'm not in the room is none of my business anyways.
Right. To me, and this, I think about sort of the libertarian solution to these wildly complex social problems. I think a lot, if not all, of the drive to transition kids is coming from the government school system, and it seems to be completely captured. And I hear horror stories from parents, and I read these stories about how parents aren't even allowed to know what conversations are being had.
That's one of the number one things that I have when it comes to like the bills I'm looking to pass is a responsibility to report. So if a child comes to you and says that they are having gender dysphoria, you have a responsibility to report. Either that is to report it to the parents that child is having, that they need to go get mental health coverage. Like that's the parent's responsibility, is to get the child mental health care. Or if you really think that child is a danger, instead of knowingly leaving them in a dangerous situation, you have to contact the authorities. I mean, I think CPS is an awful organization, but they're there for a reason to protect children. That's like the only thing that we can do right now. So you have to like try to get them out of an actually dangerous situation, which it's a fine line, because they will try to use that to, if you don't affirm your child, then they'll try to take your children and stuff like that. But what ends up happening, and this is the reason why the bill passed in Florida, the quote unquote "Don't Say Gay" bill, it was brought on because there was a child in South Florida who the school hid their gender transition at school because the parents were Catholic. That was the reasoning for hiding this transition for them, because they were Catholic. That child attempted suicide twice in 2 days. At school, and now they are suing the school because they hid this. And again, it's their parents' responsibility to get them the mental health care that they need. And if they don't know that their child's having issues like this, then that's a huge issue, because it could lead to that.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the biggest bills that I champion across the country too.
I sort of, and I know it's complicated because you could also go, that Bill Maher had this great monologue on this, that the trend in California is that every generation the trans population doubles, and at some point everybody's going to be trans in California. Yeah. And his point is that this is political ideology. Yep. This is not biology at all. I err on the side of parents always, and I realize that parents make bad decisions as well. Yeah. But the idea that the system, the government institutions, would be promoting anything, one way or the other, and then hiding it from parents, and then destroying kids' lives. Like, to me, that just says we need to shift the power back to the parents, so that
absolutely,
because call me crazy, but I think most parents care more about their kids than some
I would think
faceless, gray-suited institution.
Yeah. Well, and that's so one of the bills I did consult on bill in Louisiana that's I think it was pre-filed, so we should be seeing it possibly come up soon. But it was like their version of the parental choice bill. And when the congresswoman approached me about it, I told her straight up, the first meeting we had, I said, I would honestly rather see you pass a fund students instead of institutions bill instead of this bill, so that way parents can just choose to go wherever they want. Let the free market take control, and if they're teaching woke in schools and you don't want that, then you can go somewhere else. But if you're going to pass this bill, I want to make sure it's right. It's actually not homophobic or transphobic or any of this stuff. I just want to make sure it's right. And we had the wording right, and so you're not getting attacked like they got attacked in Florida for some of the ambiguity that was in the Florida bill, as well. Like even like the comprehensive sex education that goes all the way down to like 5 years old that's being pushed in schools. Another bill that I'm very supportive of is making all of that or an opt-in system, so that way parents have to actually sign a permission slip before their children can learn this stuff, because that stuff is a parent's responsibility to teach their kids. It really is. I mean, sex ed should be a basic biology class if you really look at it, and then parents teach their kids all the other stuff. But there's some parents that are going to not want to parent their kids. They're going to want to let the schools do it. And so if you're one of those parents, you know what? Just opt your student into it. And that's, and then the other parents can take their kids out of school for the day or whatever, maybe take them to a museum and learn something relevant.
Yeah. If you made it this far into the show, it means I must be doing something right. Kibbe on Liberty is just one of the amazing products we created for the people. We tell emotionally compelling stories and produce educational videos for the liberty curious. Our award-winning documentaries personalize all things liberty, independence, creativity, hard work, integrity, and perseverance. After the show, check out our work at freethepeople.org. And if you like what you see, donate to support what we do. That's freethepeople.org. Now back to the show. This is another issue. Like I think some libertarians get caught up in the rhetoric that as long as it is a top-down, one-size-fits-all government school where the curriculum is going to be determined by bureaucrats and politicians, there's absolutely nothing wrong with weighing in on what that should be.
Yeah.
Now, you and I just agreed that it would be so much better, and honestly, the only real solution is to let parents make those decisions where their child is educated. But barring that, we're going to have a political food fight. Yeah. And one of the upsides of lockdowns, and there are very few upsides of the government's response to the pandemic, was parents seeing not just the horrible soulless regimentation of the government school system and how you're just sitting there and getting browbeat with information all day, but the curriculum itself was just nuts.
Yeah,
and but now parents see it like that. Then they had no idea. They just assume, fairly or not, that educators or the experts are going to take care of my kids. Well, the cat's out of the bag now, and that's nobody believes that anymore. So it's an opportunity, I think, to not only reform the system, but better yet.
Yeah, that and the invention of TikTok. Because now, I mean, with all of its flaws...
Are you on TikTok?
No.
Yeah.
I think I've been banned. I don't know.
Yeah.
But with all of its flaws and how awful of a app I think it is, because children are actually going on there and learning all these things, what it's done is also given people like me content of teachers going on there and just openly saying what they actually think. So it's like a free speech thing where, hey, if you give them the reins to do it, they'll usually show you who they are, and that's exactly what they've done on TikTok. So they're like bragging about what they're teaching the kids. So it's
who's what's the lady's name? Libs of TikTok.
Oh, I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah.
It's I don't even know how to. Yeah.
But that was it was sort of mystifying that she would be banned from social media for simply posting videos that presumably people want people to see.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was like you are showing videos of themselves. You're just showing a mirror. You're showing them a mirror and exactly what they look like. And because people don't agree with that stuff, they're actually going and, you know, getting all these other negative comments for it, so they're upset. But it's like, wait a second, you posted this. It's like, have you seen those new things with like the females in the gyms lately?
Yeah.
That they've been posting like these creeps are all stalking, and they're like, you. Like, the one person had an OnlyFans, and she was complaining about somebody at the gym. It's like, you post this content. You're just upset because they didn't go to your OnlyFans to see it. You know, it's like that type of stuff. It's like, you want the content because you're a content creator. You're putting this stuff on the internet. And so now you're upset because people are looking at you in real life. It doesn't make any sense in a lot of ways. And, I mean, there are creepers in the gym, but half of the time those people are just like, hey, can you, like, get off my machine?
Yeah. Those guys. So let's go... Let's go to the gym for a minute. You are against trans women competing in women's sports.
Absolutely.
Why?
There is, and the studies show this too, there is no amount of estrogen that you can take and testosterone blockers or anything that you can do that would ever eliminate the full biological advantages that you have by going through a male puberty. It's been proven time and time again. I mean, even if you're somebody like my size, who's not very big, it's like I go to the gym and I go to spin class. I mean, I've been an athlete my whole life. I was in the Army, everything like that. I go to spin class for the first time ever. Within 8 months, my max power rates are within the 80th percentile among females. That just doesn't make sense. Like, these people are trained their whole lives. If you train your whole lives in a sport and then you just go and try to transition and say you're a woman, then you're going to be leaps and bounds. And actually, Leah Thomas is the prime example of why this doesn't work. The average difference in male and female swimming among, you know, the elites is an 11% drop in performance for females. Leah Thomas's performance only dropped 2.3%, and that's how she was able to go from being ranked number almost in the 500s to number 1 in the 500 meter. It doesn't make any sense. That's the prime example. It's like, you lost 2.3%. That doesn't even get you. Like, you were not like elite, and then you're the number 1 swimmer in the world. It doesn't make sense.
Is this why J.K. Rowling originally weighed in and got in this quagmire?
I think she weighed in because she liked a tweet. And they went off on it because she was supporting I think her name's Maya Foster or Maya something, and she had gotten fired from her job for saying something. It's kind of speaking out a little bit, and so that's what kind of brought her into the fold. And then she made a statement about it, and then it just spiraled from there. And now she's basically dug her heels in, won't apologize to the woke mob, which she shouldn't, and so they just hate her.
Do you know who Zuby is?
I love Zuby.
do you support his championship deadlift that one day that he identified as a woman?
Yeah, I think that was a great move. I actually told him, so I wrote an article in the Postmillennial when U.S. rowing has now a self-ID sports law. So if you identify as a woman prior to the start of the season, and it's just simply self-ID, you don't even have to prove like you've been taking estrogen. And so you can just go in there and compete as a woman. And I have a friend that's an Olympic rower at the gym, and I was like, so you're going to be rowing for the rest of your life until you die because you can compete in the women's division once you can't compete with men anymore? we joked about that for a little bit, but when that came out, I told Zuby, I was like, you should move into rowing now and prove a point. And he actually commented, he was like, maybe I will.
Well, that's like, and this is why I would call myself a radical feminist, because taken to its logical conclusion, really what you would have to do is just eliminate women's sports. We're just going to have sports now.
Yeah.
Because everybody's going to identify however they want for strategic reasons, or cynical reasons, or whatever reasons. And to me, that seems anti-woman.
You would think.
Yeah.
But it's also equality. You know? I don't agree, but I think that we should have separations in female sports, and I actually do think that there's a lot better things we can do. Like most sports, you can have a third category, which is what they've recommended, like in the UK and in a lot of other areas. I've started to recommend that you have, third spaces. Even the NHL had a few months ago had an all-trans hockey competition. I thought that was a great idea. We should be supporting that, and so I think that that's the solution. And
You're saying that markets and cooperation and maybe just a little bit of empathy, we might be able to do this without.
Exactly. You don't have to, force people's hands by using government to like force it either way. People will come up with solutions.
That's crazy talk.
I know.
We're probably going to get demonetized on this episode for that.
Just say trans woman in the description and it will be fine. That's what I do. No, seriously, YouTube will all my videos that don't have that will start to get like ad limited just because I guess I'm flagged or something. But as soon as I put trans woman reacts in the title, no issues.
The robots the robots like that, I guess.
Yeah. Now Twitter robots don't. I mean, I was locked out of Twitter for a little while because I said, having gender dysphoria is a mental illness, but I don't think we should stigmatize mental illness. They locked me out for a couple of days. But Twitter did end up apologizing, which was something I had never seen before either.
Was that post-Elon?
Yeah, this was literally the day after Christmas my account was locked out. This is the first time I've ever been locked out of a social media account like that before. I've ever been in like trouble like that. So I'm like, what is this? And yeah, but what I had been seeing a lot post-Elon is people are getting locked out more than they were pre-Elon. But you're not seeing the full-out bans. Like, you're not seeing anybody get banned. You're just seeing like 12, week-long lockouts.
We were inexplicably, we just did a conversation about AI art with a bunch of artists, most of whom were raging against it, and I was half-heartedly trying to defend technological innovation as, we don't know exactly how this is going to turn out, but it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
That was, we at least last time I checked, we were not allowed to boost that show for violent content or something. So I actually think the AI robots were pissed that they were being criticized.
Probably. And it's like if you watched our Timcast, we were talking about ChatGPT and the Bing chat. The Bing chat is like apparently learning, and it's like thinks it's alive or something like that. It's just really, Microsoft's built Skynet, Put that into a actual like life-size robot, and you have Terminator.
So what are the other? You have your podcast has a cool name,
Transform to Freedom.
Transform to Freedom.
Yeah.
What are the issues like? What are the issues that matter most to you? I mean, we've talked about a couple of them.
Yeah, obviously, the trans rights issue, like the trans issues, are probably my biggest content because it's probably the biggest thing out there. One thing that most people are talking about. But I talk about I do anti-war content. I do a lot of like libertarian and just like political content. I'd like to do interviews with people on my show. We'll do those sometimes, and just whoever's interesting to come on and talk and hang out, we'll talk about their stuff. But actually, one that I don't think a lot of people realize either is I've done some events in Georgia for legalization of marijuana as well. So drug legalization is one thing that I think could be really positive. Like, I did a video and then I did an article in my Substack about psychedelics and how big pharma is in bed with the government, and while we're suppressing we're suppressing natural medications, and yet big pharma is making all this money pushing even more dangerous stuff, like opioids and stuff like that. So it's like, and I think that even like SSRI use is up so much in the country right now. And it seems like, and one of the comments is like, when you use SSRIs, you feel emotionally numb. I think that could be one reason why we're seeing so much violence in the country, is because people are hopped up on SSRIs and are emotionally numb. Whereas like LSD psychotherapy, you can do one of the studies I read is like you can do 3 sessions of LSD psychotherapy with a trained professional. 3 sessions the effects last up to a year right now. And so those are the types of things that I think we should be pushing towards. As well as like if you legalize marijuana, most people don't realize, like, if you're talking climate control, like climate issues, and you're not talking about legalization of marijuana and using hemp plastics instead of oil-based plastics, then you're really not serious about climate change, because oil-based plastic or hemp-based plastics is a carbon neutral solution. The plants themselves create enough oxygen to support the entire production of that plastic. And so that's like one of the big things I think about, like with marijuana, even other than the medicinal effects and everything of it.
Really thinking a lot about, and I knew this, and it's nothing new that big pharma games the system And one of the games they play is they will gobble up medical innovations that might compete with the one that they already have that's a lesser product, but it's got FDA approval. So it's very centralized, and it's designed to maximally extract revenue. So if there are therapeutics that might work better for mitigating the damage of a virus versus a vaccine, they're going to try to crush.
Yeah. And remember that happened. Like, they were all like, marijuana might, help mitigate being able to contract COVID. That was one of the big misinformation things that everybody was talking about. It was like, I don't know if it was true or not, but there was one study that showed it might be true. So why not study that? But nobody wants to talk about that. They want to push the big pharma drugs.
They don't support studying anything that's not patentable.
Exactly. Well, and this was why you're actually seeing a lot of ketamine treatments starting to come out, because it's like one of those other things. It's like, okay, well, we can do ketamine now. It's starting to show them, but now it can be profitable for them because a lot of people want to try it.
Yeah. The use the L word, liberty. Would you consider yourself more conservatarian, libertarian? And how did you find that stuff?
Well, I would say I am more, I guess, a conservatarian, though. I do lean very heavily to the right. I'm not, like, strictly in the center. Actually, I'm very far, like I said, I'm, like, one step above an ANCAP. So but it was Ron Paul, which is going to be awesome to be at the same event as him this weekend, is because, again, I thought he made so much sense. I had always been more of a constitutionalist, even in the Republican Party. I was like, this document's great, and it all made sense in how it was written and all of that stuff. I just, again, couldn't get past his foreign policy, so I was like, hey. And then once that changed, I was like, this makes complete sense. The Republican Party is basically the same as the Democrat Party, so I'm gonna go check out what these people have to say. And just logically thinking, I was like, this all makes sense to me. And so when I found the Libertarian Party and all that, I think the first time, well, I was going to say 2016 is the first time I didn't vote. It's the first time I didn't vote for one of the establishment candidates. I didn't vote for Gary Johnson, though, either. So 2020 was the first time I didn't regret my vote, because I did vote for Joe Jorgensen in 2020, and that's, started to move in that. And then moving to Atlanta, I started getting involved and meeting the people in the Libertarian Party of Georgia, and so that's started to even move into getting involved in that type of stuff other than just cultural issues.
But I think your point, and this is important for my libertarian friends to hear this, building coalitions around something that we can agree on. And again, like Ron Paul did this so well with Dennis Kucinich, who I think is speaking at the rally as well. I might be wrong about that, but that was this old, and I sort of hate the left-right spectrum, because I don't think we're really on the right. But you had a guy like Ron Paul working with a very progressive Democrat, and you have a guy like Rand Paul working with Bernie Sanders, and Mike Lee working again with like. The guy from the other senator from Vermont. Well,
and Thomas Massie recently was working with Cory Booker on expanding the Right to Try Act. To any experimental procedure, whether it's whether you're terminal or not, you should be allowed to do with your body as you please, and they agreed on that. Let's work on it together.
Yeah. So drug decriminalization, criminal justice reform, war powers. There's just a very substantial list of things that don't require you to be one of us.
Yeah. You don't have to want to end the Fed, which you should, but you don't have to want
to. We'll get there later. And even Bernie, he wanted to audit the Fed, and he backed off, kind of left us high and dry. But the cool thing about, and I say this a lot, and I try to be empathetic and try to listen to what, if you like Bernie, I want to understand why. What is it about him that attracts, or AOC, like what is it about her that you think resonates? And you realize that on a very superficial level, they kind of sound like Ron Paul.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting because I've known people who were not super into politics. but they liked what Bernie was saying. Like, some of the stuff made sense, but then they also liked Ron Paul. Like, they were fans of both. I'm like, how can you be fans of both? And then you start to see that there are a lot of stuff that they may be close, on some issues. Like, okay, I can kind of see that. And then they just seem like, older, lovable guys, I guess,
But they're sort of, and the fact that they're old guys just raging against the machine, that's I think that's pretty attractive. I do got to pick on Bernie, though, because I think he's got a new book, but he's doing a speaking tour that says it's okay to be angry at capitalism. Tickets are $95. That's awesome.
Well, that is the ultimate capital. I mean, that's the ultimate grift, right? It's like, you are so against capitalism, you're using capitalism. AOC was the same way. She's so against capitalism, and she's selling like her shirts for like $95, and you're just like, are you against capitalism?
It's a mystery that we won't solve here.
No.
So where do people find your pod and the other projects you're working on? Because you got like 1,000 shingles here.
Yeah, I do just about everything. So, actually, if you just go to my website, sarahhigdon.com, there's a links page on there. So I actually post just links to all the articles I've written and like the postmillennial human events. It's got links to all my social media, which I'm on like every social media platform there is, like especially like Rumble and all that stuff, because if you get banned on one, then you got these other good social media platforms, right? But then Instagram and Twitter, my handle is Sara Higdon _, and those are probably the best places to go. YouTube is youtube.com/Sara Higdon. That's where you can find me.
Are you going to be at Freedom Fest this year?
I am going to be at Freedom Fest as of right now, and hopefully we got a really good panel that I'm working on with the team over there to bring you. We're kind of waiting to see, because one of the people may not be able to make it, just depending on what the laws are to get them into the country. So we're waiting on the vax requirement to drop.
Oh, jeez. Well, pass the House.
Yeah.
Because Thomas Massey's on the Rules Committee.
Yeah, exactly. That's great.
Didn't see that coming, but
no.
It shows you how really stupid things are impossible to fix, even though everybody that's not insane thinks that that's stupid.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
I just described politics in a nutshell.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thanks for doing this.
Yes, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for watching. If you liked the conversation, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and also ring the bell for notifications. And if you want to know more about Free the People, go to freethepeople.org.